So today we're picking up management in Canada, the competitive challenges. We're on chapter 1 and we're about a little over halfway through. So starting on page 22. The behavioral approaches to management. The behavioral approaches to management developed partly because managers found that employees didn't always behave as they were supposed to. These approaches fall into two separate branches. The first branch, the human relations approach, became popular in the 1940s and 50s, although it was first proposed several decades earlier. The second branch, the behavioral science approach, received little attention until the 1950s. So the definition of human relations approach. The management approach that focuses on the interaction of individuals within groups and pays heed to the individual's needs, goals, and expectations. So they first talk about Elton Mayo, 1880 to 1949, and the human relations approach. In the human relations approach, managers and other employees are studied in terms of what occurs within the group. It is argued that to develop good human relations, managers must know which psychological and sociological factors influence the behavior of the employees and how employees are influenced by the group within which they operate. Thus, while scientific management concentrates on the job's physical environment, human relations concentrates on the social and psychological environments. Elton Mayo placed his focus on the informal group as an outlet and a source of motivation for workers. Elton Mayo placed his focus on the informal group as an outlet and a source of motivation for workers. His work also led to an emphasis on the importance of an adequate upward flowing communication system. His Hawthorne studies are among the most famous in management literature. The studies are named for the Hawthorne works of Western Electric Company, where they took place from 1927 through 1932. The original aim was to determine whether production workers would assemble more electric instruments if the level of illumination was raised from the existing dark and gloomy levels. The first studies showed that with each increase in light levels, production went up. As the researchers proceeded, they found to their amazement that when they progressively lowered the light levels, with each change, production went up still further. After initial confusion, the researchers concluded that the employees were reacting in the ways that they thought the experimenters wanted them to react because they were so grateful that someone was paying attention to them. These influences are called the Hawthorne effect, which will be discussed in greater detail in chapter 6. For now, the important fact is that the research established new principles of human resource management, stressing the impact of group dynamics and motivation, and that employees may be motivated by more than economic factors. And then there's a picture in here and it's captioned, "It was at the Hawthorne works of Western Electric Company that Elton Mayo and his colleagues formulated concepts that subjects of experiments often react in ways they think the researchers want them to." And then the definition, Hawthorne effect, the tendency of workers to increase their productivity when management pays attention to them, and also to respond as they believe researchers intend them to. And then it moves on to Mary Parker Follett, 1868 to 1933, and group dynamics. Follett laid the foundation for studies in group dynamics, conflict management, and political processes in organizations. She and other early human relations writers served as a counterbalance to the impersonal approaches of the scientific management theorists. Next is Joan Woodward and the behavioral science approach. Behavioral science scholars argue that employees are much more complex than the economic man, described in the classical approaches of the social man. described in the classical approaches, or the social man described in the human relations approach. Behavioral science concentrates more on the nature of work itself and the degree to which it can fulfill the human need to use skills and abilities. From 1953 to 1957, Joan Woodward led a research team studying 100 English manufacturing companies. She found significant differences from company to company in characteristics such as span of control, and that has in brackets, number of workers reporting to a manager, number of levels of authority, the extent of written communications, and the clarity of job definitions. She concluded that the more an organization employs technological methods in its operations, the more it tends to shed middle managerial positions, thus altering its organizational structure and managerial culture. In contrast, with the teachings of Frederick W. Taylor, she concluded that there is no one best way to manage or structure an organization, but that a pragmatic approach should be applied to combine features that best fit the particular organization. And the definition for behavioral science approach. The approach to management that attempts to incorporate findings of social scientists, recognizing the complexity of individuals and what interests and motivates them. Contributions and limitations of the behavioral approaches. The behavioral approaches stress that since managers must get work done through others, they must understand interpersonal relations and must both motivate and lead. But management is more than applied behavioral science, as it must reflect the gathering and application of reliable and specific information, and also the interactions within the organization. The systems approaches to management. And first we'll start with the definitions. Systems approaches. Approaches to management based on the assumption that an organization is a collection of parts and that is primarily concerned with the interactions of those parts. System, a collection of individual parts that are coordinated to accomplish a common purpose. The systems approaches to management consider organizations and management problems by focusing on the interaction of the individual components to form a functioning whole. A useful metaphor is a car. It has wheels, an engine, some form of transmitting power from the engine to the wheels, and a steering wheel to direct the movement. These are all components, and the car as a whole is the system. A system is greater than the sum of its parts, although each part contributes to achieving the goal of the organization. For example, Finning Tractor has production, sales and marketing departments, accounting and human resource functions, sales agencies and offices in Edmonton, Kamloops, Grand Prairie, Fort McMurray, Victoria, and several other cities in Western Canada, as well as in Chile, Scotland, England, and Poland. Finning Tractor, however, is more than the sum of these individual components. It is a whole that encompasses all of these and brings meaning to them because of their interrelationships. From the system's perspective, management involves managing and solving problems in each part of the organization, but doing so with the understanding that actions taken in one part will affect other parts of the organization. For example, if the production manager decides to shut down an important production machine for repair, this decision will likely have an effect on marketing, finance, personnel, and other segments of the organization. When a sales representative promises quick delivery to a customer, meeting this commitment may disrupt production schedules, increase costs, and create employee resentment that will have to be dealt with by the human resources department. As this example illustrates, managers must view the organization as a dynamic whole and try to anticipate the unintended as well as intended consequences of their decisions. Chester Barnard, 1886 to 1961, and the systems approaches. In his classic management book, The Functions of the Executive, Chester Barnard, the president of New Jersey Bell Telephone, emphasized the importance and variability of individuals in the work setting. He believed that an essential element for an organization to be successful is its people's willingness to contribute their individual efforts for the benefit of the whole system. And we have some definitions. Inputs: the influences on an organization from various aspects of its environment, including reactions of suppliers, customers, the general public, shareholders, and employees, effects of competition, governmental actions, and economic factors. Next definition: transformation: the process of change that occurs as an organization processes, inputs, and changes a product or service from the form in which it was received to the form in which it is delivered to a customer or to the next stage of the production. Outputs: the products or services produced by an organization. Feedback: the response of those who receive a message or become aware of a situation communicated back to the originator of the message or the creator of the situation. The systems approaches stress that organizational effectiveness, even survival, depends on the organization's interaction with its environment, as well as its own internal operations. The organization receives inputs from the external environment, causes a transformation in materials, or by preparing to offer a service, and then issues outputs in the form of products or services. Important in these interactions is the concept of feedback. Feedback can be received directly from information such as cost analyses and record of defects and scrap, or it can be received from observing whether customers continue to buy its product or services. In the case of not-for-profit organizations, the ultimate feedback may be whether the intended publics use the services, accept the information disseminated, or continue to provide support through donations. Because of the tainted blood episode, the Canadian Red Cross received feedback in several ways: unfavorable publicity in the media, public criticism, demands from government to reorganize, and reduce donations of both blood and operating funds. Finally, it had to relinquish its blood collection and distribution activities entirely. Exhibit 1.6 on page 26 provides an illustration of the interactions described in the systems approaches. Exhibit 1.6, the 4 parts of organizational activity. Inputs, in brackets, human creativity and skills, information, raw materials, finance, financial resources, and then the arrow towards transformation, which then has the description: management know-how and technology transforms inputs. And then the next arrow goes to outputs, which is the products and services. And then it loops back to inputs with an explanation of environmental feedback serves as a response to products and services. According to the systems theories, it is the task of management not only to ensure effective planning, organizing, leading, and controlling, but also to seek and to be alert to feedback from a multiplicity of sources, and then to make appropriate accommodations to changes in the organization's environment. Contributions and limitations of the systems approaches. The systems approaches makes an important contribution by emphasizing that the decisions made in one part of the organization will affect other parts of the organization, as well as the environment beyond the organization. Recognizing these interrelationships, managers understand that they must think broadly about a problem rather than concentrate only on immediate results. The systems approaches provides a framework within which competing pressures within the organization can be resolved. For example, the production objective of low manufacturing costs and the marketing objective of offering a broad product line, which requires high production costs. Seldom can both objectives be fully achieved at the same time. The challenge for managers is to balance the low-cost objectives of the production department against the customer appeal objectives of the marketing department in order to remain competitive in the external environment within which the company operates. Critics have argued that the systems approaches are abstract and not very practical. Talking about inputs, transformations, and outputs isn't how everyday managers discuss problems, make decisions, and face reality. Managers must think, respond, and observe. For them, the systems approaches are good for classroom analysis, but being in the middle of daily decision-making precludes deep systems like analysis and thinking. True as this is, and the criticism applies equally to all management theories, there is also some merit in managers being reminded of the interconnectedness of all elements of the organization and of the organization with its external environment. And then there's a picture of, and it says, feedback comes in many forms. In the case of the Canadian Red Cross, it has been in the form of a decrease in public support as a result of allegations that its officials made decisions that placed the public at risk. This has led to other agencies taking over the blood supply from the Red Cross. The contingency management approach. And first, a couple definitions. Contingency management approach, the theory of management that recognizes that the appropriate managerial response to a particular situation is contingent on the specific characteristics of the situation. Universalist management approach, the theory of management that presupposes that for every problem there is a best answer and that the manager's task is to find that answer and apply it universally. Fremont Cast, James Rosenzweig, and contingency management. In a seminal article in a 1972 issue of the Academy of Management Journal, Cast and Rosenzweig described the contingency management approach as follows. The organization is a system composed of subsystems. The contingency view seeks to understand the interrelationships within and among subsystems, as well as between the organization and its environment. Contingency views are ultimately directed toward suggesting organizational designs and managerial systems most appropriate for specific situations. While Frederick W. Taylor argued that there exists a single best way to perform each different management function, in brackets, the universalist management approach, contingency management theorists believe that although there are some generally applicable principles, management response must reflect the unique aspects of each particular situation and the differences among the individuals involved. It would be futile to try to manage Memorial University with all the same management techniques that would be appropriate for Pizza Pizza Limited, or to apply the same disciplinary action to a senior computer researcher who is perennially late for normal work hours, but who works well into the night, and to a ferry worker who frequently misses the sailing to which he or she is assigned. Contingent factors such as the kind and size of the organization, the necessity for promptness, and the seriousness of an error must be taken into account in deciding which management principles should be applied and to what extent. Time is also a factor. If a particular solution resolved a problem last month and what appears to be the same problem arises today, that same solution may no longer be the optimum solution and may not even work at all. In the month that has elapsed since the problem last arose, economic pressures may have worsened or lessened, production schedules may have become looser or tighter, competition may have changed, and there may be different people involved. According to this approach, it is the manager's task to identify the changes that have occurred, to evaluate the effects of these changes, and to choose what action to take in the new situation. Contingency theorists do not assert that all managerial situations are unique. Rather, they argue that situations are often similar to the extent that some of the same principles of management can be effectively applied. Theory Z. In 1981, William Uchi, a professor of management, introduced what he termed Theory Z management. Theory Z is an attempt to amalgamate what Uchi sees as the best aspects of both Japanese and Western style management. An example of the differences between the two is illustrated by the practices relating to an individual's career path. In large Western companies, each individual tends to have a relatively defined career path, progressing from one level in a specialty, such as accounting production, to a higher level in the same specialty. In contrast, the usual Japanese practice ensures that each individual who is destined for promotion is first exposed to several different specialties, all at roughly the same level, before progressing to the next level in the hierarchy. The Japanese practice provides broader exposure, but results in much slower promotion than might occur in the West. Uchi's ideal is a middle ground, where an individual's career path is not as unidirectional as in the Western style management, but not as diverse and slow as the Japanese style. Although Uchi's writings generated considerable discussion among business academics, few Western companies have attempted to adopt Theory Z principles. As was mused in 1984 by Harold Janine, then CEO of ITT. At the time, few Western middle managers would have wanted to exchange their personal freedom to better themselves by changing employers for the longer-term commitments required in the Theory Z approach. Even so, Uchi has contributed useful concepts to add to the arsenal of management tools, and in one sense, he reinforces the validity of contingency theories that solutions must fit current circumstances. Practical application of management theories. The preceding discussion touches only a few of the highlights in the development of management theory. Practical limitations on space preclude reference to many other scholars and managers, each of whom contributed something to the understanding of management as an essential activity in any organization. The modern manager has the opportunity to choose relevant features of classical management theory, overlay them with some of the behavioral approaches, apply pragmatic system usages, and some ideas from Theory Z, adapt them in a contingency form to the culture of the organization and the personality of the individual manager, and mix in a generous measure of what we might call common sense, all the while watching the professional literature for new refinements that might be tried cautiously in the hope that some will prove useful. Contemporary management writers who influence today's managers. Michael Porter and Comparative Advantage. Michael Porter, a professor of industrial organization and a consultant at the Harvard Business School, was one of the first contemporary scholars to apply traditional economic thinking to management problems. Porter explains corporate strategy in terms of a competitive marketplace. He identifies 4 generic strategies: 1, cost leadership; 2, differentiation; 3, cost focus; and 4, focused differentiation. In Porter's lexicon, cost leadership means achieving lower costs per unit of a production or service than can be achieved by its competitors while still making a profit. Differentiation is the practice of providing superior quality to customers or users. Cost focus refers to controlling costs in a restricted market area. Focused differentiation is the application of the differentiation in a limited area or in a unique product or service. These strategies are illustrated in Exhibit 1.7. Exhibit 1.7, Porter's competitive strategy matrix. And there's the competitive scope, which is either a broad target or a narrow target. And that's contrasted against the competitive advantage, which is either lower cost or differentiation. So when broad target and lower cost meet, they explain that as cost leadership. When narrow target and lower cost meet, they explain that as cost focus. When broad target and differentiation meet, they explain that as differentiation. And when narrow target and differentiation meet, they explain that as focused differentiation. Porter's attention to competitive advantage has had a significant impact on practicing managers as well as on academics, as it helps to focus thinking on key elements of planning. Porter's hypotheses will be discussed at greater length in Chapter 4. Porter's concept of differentiation is illustrated by the Coca-Cola Company, which offers what is considered by many to be unique taste throughout most of the world. Tom Peters and excellence. In 1982, Tom Peters and Robert Waterman wrote In Search of Excellence. It rapidly became a best-selling and developed a huge cult-like following. In that and later books and in workshops that he conducted, Peters attempted to identify the qualities and characteristics of companies that were unusually successful. He states that although there is much diversity among the management practices of companies, there are 9 aspects that are almost universally found in companies that are well managed. They are managing ambiguity and paradox, a bias for action, close to the customer, autonomy and entrepreneurship, productivity through people, hands-on value-driven, stick to the knitting, simple form, lean staff, loose type properties, and I'll give you the explanation for each of those as is here. Managing ambiguity and paradox. The business climate is always uncertain and always ambiguous. The rational numerical approach doesn't always work because we live in irrational times. A bias for action. Do it, try it, fix it. The point is to try something without being dissuaded by the fear of failure. Soichiro Honda, founder of Honda, said that only 1 out of 100 of his ideas worked. Fortunately for him, he kept trying after his 99th failure. Close to the customer. Excellent companies listen closely to their customers and have an almost uncanny feel for what they want. Autonomy and entrepreneurship. Ownership of a department, task, or problem is essential in motivating employees. Desire for autonomy is the most frequently cited reason for entering into self-employment. Excellent communication, or excellent companies allow and encourage autonomy and within company entrepreneurship. Productivity through people. Not surprisingly, people act in accordance with the way they are treated. Treat them as untrustworthy and they will be. Treat them as business partners and they will be. Excellent companies have taken the leap of faith required to trust their employees to do the right thing. Hands-on, value-driven. Constantly ask the value added of every process and procedure. Stick to the knitting. Stay close to your organization's basic industry. The skills or culture involved in a different industry may be a shock that is fatal to the organization. Simple form, lean staff. Excellent companies are characterized by organizations with few layers of management, unencumbered by a bloated headquarters. Loose, tight properties. Tight control is maintained while at the same time allowing staff far more flexibility than is the norm. A later book by Peters, Liberation Management, takes his thinking further and states that trying to be close to the customer isn't enough. He adds that management must remove structural impediments such as rigid rules, hierarchies, stilted policies, and stifling demands. He proposes a symbiosis, that is, mutual helpfulness and interdependence, with both domestic and foreign customers. Critics have pointed out that some of the companies identified by Peters and Waterman as excellent actually may not have been applying the principles described by authors. In addition, whether they were actually applying those principles, some of the companies identified as excellent have subsequently failed financially. Nevertheless, the lines of thought brought by Peters and Waterman have stimulated managers, researchers, and theorists to think more seriously about organizations, the tasks of managers and other employees, and how to improve management practices. In a sense, they have popularized the study of management and have made management theories background knowledge for most managers in North America today. Peter Drucker and management for long-term success. Although Peter Drucker's many works are known to most thoughtful managers, they have not achieved the public acclaim, nor perhaps the lucrative sales volume of such writers as Tom Peters. Drucker describes the role of managers as follows. Managers practice management. They do not practice economics. They do not practice quantification. They do not practice behavior science. These are the tools for the manager. As a specific discipline, management has its own problems, specific approaches, distinct concerns. A man who only knows the skills and techniques without understanding the fundamentals of management is not a manager. He is at best only a technician. Throughout his writing, Drucker has stressed that the search for profit is not the major objective of business. In one of his works, he writes, "There's only one valid definition of business purpose: to create a customer. What the business thinks it produces is not of first importance, especially not to the future of the business and its success. What the customer thinks he is buying, what he considers value, is decisive. It determines what a business is, what it produces, and whether it will prosper." Drucker considers the present to be an era of transformation and believes that business inevitably will fail if they do not change with the times. He states that to stay current, management must engage in 3 key practices. First, it continually must implement improvement in everything the organization does. Second, it must learn to apply and make use of its knowledge. Third, it must innovate constantly. Drucker argues that an organization can accomplish these practices only by acquiring the most essential resource: knowledgeable people. W. Edwards Deming, Total Quality Management and Leadership. The late W. Edwards Deming is known for developing the concept of total quality management, which emphasizes employee involvement, leadership, and continuous improvement. He writes, "People are born with intrinsic motivation. People are born with a need for relationships with other people and with a need to be loved and esteemed by others. One is born with a natural inclination to learn and to be innovative. One inherits the right to enjoy his work." Deming states that the role of a company is not only to make money, but to stay in business and provide jobs through innovation, constant improvement, and maintenance. His approach to leadership is to help people do a better job, to employ objective methods to find out who needs help, and to provide that help by giving adequate instructions and offering appropriate training. Philip B. Crosby and Zero Defects. Philip B. Crosby, who has contributed insights found throughout this book, brought new emphasis to the question of quality through his innovative application of the term zero defects. The genius of this approach is to teach managers that they do not have to accept defects as normal. Crosby proposes that top management must make the commitment that the whole organization will function with zero defects. He says that when this commitment is made, the other managers will create quality improvement teams and quality councils, establish quality measures for every activity, train employees in quality management, and generally celebrate quality. He makes the seemingly obvious but usually disregarded point that if the job is done correctly the first time, that is, if it meets the zero defects standard, the cost of achieving quality will be reduced to its lowest possible level. Management in the real world. We've always done it this way, is the title. A story has been told in management circles that might be apocryphal, but might well be true. It illustrates the hazards of adhering too long to a management practice that was once useful, but that has outgrown its usefulness. It is said that in 1860, when Prince Otto von Bismarck, later the Iron Chancellor of the newly unified Germany, was ambassador to the court of Tsar Alexander of Russia, he asked why there was always an armed guard standing sentry at a particular spot in the lawn of the Kremlin. When the Tsar inquired, he found that no one seemed to know the reason for the sentry. The commanding general is reported to have said, "It is in accord with ancient custom." The Tsar demanded that a search be made of the records. After 3 days of digging through volumes of standing military orders, the answer was discovered. In 1780, 80 years before Bismarck's question, and near the end of a harsh Russian winter, Catherine the Great had seen some lovely crocuses poking up through the patches of melting snow. To keep the blossoms from being trampled, she had ordered that a guard be mounted there. Unfortunately, no one provided for the order to be rescinded when its need passed. So for the ensuing 80 years, there had been a 24-hour guard for the crocuses that had been there for only a few days. This story, apocryphal or not, stands as a reminder to all managers that what was once a fine solution to a problem may no longer be valid. How many management practices are continued because we've always done it? Yeah, how many management practices are continued simply because we've always done it this way? The workplace of tomorrow. Management theory often may seem to be far removed from the day-to-day activities of managers. Yet many of the principles that we take for granted today were startling and innovative when they were first proposed. Typically, management theorists study a problem, formulate hypotheses, test the hypotheses against what actually happens in companies and other organizations, and then publish findings and proposals. Managers who take their responsibilities seriously read a wide range of these publications and decide whether the principles enunciated seem to make sense for them. Eventually, those principles and theories that stand the test of time become the accepted norm, and those managers who do not practice them are increasingly seen as behind the times and unacceptably old-fashioned. Finally, the principles that started as new and innovative ideas become part of what everyone knows, and we wonder how anyone could think otherwise. In this manner, management is constantly in a state of change, often slow and not everywhere simultaneously, but change nonetheless. No one can safely predict which of the latest management theories will stand the test of time and which will be relegated to the dustbin of fads. As Henry Mintzberg says in The Rise and Fall of Strategic Planning, management theories have their place, but managers cannot rely on them as substitutes for judgment and adaptability. In one of his more trenchant observations, he says, strategies grow initially like weeds. They are not cultivated like tomatoes. One of the certainties is that management 25 years from now will be different from what it is today. What is equally certain is that even if a particular theory does not survive intact, it will have made some impact on thinking and on management practices. As a consequence, those managers who keep up with serious reading on management issues will be among those who are best equipped to adapt and to innovate, while those managers who ignore these opportunities will gradually slip behind their competition. As almost any student of management would agree, knowledge is an indispensable cornerstone of good management. Summary of learning objectives. Define the terms management, competitiveness, and quality. This chapter introduces a number of key terms that are fundamental to the study of management. Management is the process by which one or more persons coordinate their own activities and the activities of other persons to achieve business objectives. Competitiveness is the capacity in a free and fair market to produce goods and services that meet the needs and wishes of customers without causing environmental degradation, while simultaneously maintaining or expanding the real incomes of its employees and its owners. It is the ultimate measure of potential for effective operations. Quality is the inherent nature of goods and services that compares with a norm or standard of fitness for the intended use. Explain why a competitive focus has become imperative in a globalizing world. The organization that does not provide goods or services that are better, more available, more attractive, or less expensive than similar offerings of competitors, either domestically or foreign, will inevitably lose customers or other forms of support and eventually will fail. Identify the traditional functions and purposes of management. Planning is the determination of objectives and discerning and organizing the activities that will achieve them. Organizing is creating the policies and procedures and assembling and training the staff to achieve the objectives. Controlling involves monitoring activities and providing feedback and motivation for all people involved to ensure effective application of resources towards the achievement of objectives. Leading consists of showing by example and helping people to know how to contribute most effectively to achieving the objectives of the organization. Explain the types of skills that managers need to achieve their goals. Depending on their level in the organizational structure and on the specific responsibilities, managers need to be able to apply to various extents all or most of the following skills: conceptual, analytical, interpersonal, including communication, and technical, including computer skills. Discuss the major theories of management and their relevance to management today. The classical approach to management focuses on the tasks being performed. The behavioral approach emphasizes the responses and actions of people. Frederick W. Taylor introduced scientific, that is quantified, methods to the study of management. Joan Woodward, among others, showed that empirical research can be helpful in this study. The systems approach, as exemplified by Chester Barnard, views organizations as a collection of its parts and their interrelationships. The human relations approach, of which Elton Mayo and Mary Parker Follett were early proponents, focuses on the behavior of individuals in a group. The contingency management approach recognizes that there are some universal principles, but that is not the case, not a case of one size fits all. Instead, solutions to specific management problems must be tailored to the surrounding circumstances. Michael Porter, in advancing a theory of competitive advantage, urges the need to adapt to circumstances in order to be competitive. W. Edwards Deming stresses the importance of quality, and Philip B. Crosby is best known for his advocacy of a zero defects approach. Peter Drucker offers broad-ranging concepts of management, many of which are based on the need for innovation and choosing the right person for the job. Contrast management in a small business with that in a large corporation. Management of any enterprise, regardless of size, consists of various parts of planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. The major difference that stems from size is that in a small organization, one or more individuals must cover all four of these fundamental functions. While in a large organization, many of the tasks associated with each function are carried out by separate departments and different individuals. As a consequence, large organizations have potential for specialization, while small organizations require more generalists. Small organizations, however, have an advantage in that they are less likely to have problems in coordinating the thinking and efforts of the smaller number of people involved in the various functions. From a theoretical standpoint, management is essentially the same regardless of size. Differences occur in the application and implementation of the theories. Discuss why it is important for management students, tomorrow's managers, to develop their own theories of management. Each of the management theorists described in this chapter has brought some worthwhile concepts to the thinking, both of management students and of actual managers. For today's student, tomorrow's manager, these concepts will remain purely academic unless the student formulates a personal approach to management and thinks clearly about how this composite approach can and will be applied as opportunities arise in the student's personal and business life. And then it just lists off some key terms, which would have been definitions we gave throughout the reading, and then has some review and discussion questions, but it doesn't provide the answers, but I'll read them to you. What are the four basic functions of management and how do they relate to each other? So I would suppose we actually just read that. Why is it that efforts to improve efficiency may not improve effectiveness? What skills does every modern manager have to exercise to a greater or lesser degree, depending on the manager's level in the organizational structure, specific responsibilities, and other environmental factors? What did each of Frederick Taylor, Joan Woodward, Elton Mayo, Chester Barnard, Fremont Cast, Michael Porter, and Henry Mintzberg contribute to the development of modern theories of management? What refinement and extension did Philip B. Crosby contribute to the principles enunciated by W. Edwards Deming? So those were recall questions. And then the understanding review questions. What is the Hawthorne effect, and how does it impinge on other management theories? If you have solved a problem once and it arises again, can you safely apply the identical solution that was successful before? Explain and suggest hypothetical examples of your point. What would be the effects on a business if it attempted to function as a closed system? Tom Peters has been criticized as offering only anecdotes rather than giving specific advice to managers. Of what value are such anecdotes, if any, to practicing managers? How can you best prepare yourself for a future managerial role? And then application. In 1 page or less, write a summary of your personal theories of management, drawing as much as you wish on any one or more of the theorists quoted in this chapter. Give appropriate credit to your sources. Select from the library one article or book by Peter Drucker, W. Edwards Deming, or Philip B. Crosby, and choose a single sentence from it that conveys an important idea. Copy the sentence, restate it in your own words, and in a single page or less, either discuss in what way it enhances your understanding of management, or alternatively, in what way you believe it will be an oversimplification or even an incorrect analysis. Arrange to meet with a manager of a business, not-for-profit organization, or governmental agency. Ask to what extent that manager plans, organizes, leads, and controls, and how these functions are accomplished. Take notes at the interview and add an evaluation of the responses you receive. Case 1-1, Russian workers and North American managers. Managing is a difficult job wherever it is practiced. Managers have trouble satisfying everyone, their peers, subordinates, superiors, and the public. If Canadian managers have a difficult job, Russian managers may face the impossible. In Russian enterprise, managers are confronted with poor machinery, a lack of raw materials, and a workforce whose work ethic has been suppressed since the 1917 revolution. But opportunities to locate plants, offices, and buildings in Russia are thought to be so attractive to foreign investors that learning about Russian management thinking and practice has become important. Polaroid Corporation has a circuit board plant about 100 kilometers south of Moscow in Obninsk. The plant produces about 70,000 circuit boards a month for the company's instant cameras. In the plant, Polaroid has introduced new equipment and standards of cleanliness that far exceed the norm in Russian plants. After all, old equipment and messy work areas have been the rule for over 75 years in the Russian Republic. North American managers staff a number of key positions in the Obninsk plant, which has a reputation of being efficient and able to produce high-quality circuit boards. In other plants that are still state-controlled and managed by Russians, the circuit board defect rate is 10%. A zero defect level is considered a foolishly unattainable goal. In the Obninsk plant, the defect rate is 0.5%, not yet at zero defects, but very close, and the plant is still trying. Is it the technology, the management, the workforce's morale, or a combination of these factors that have made the Obninsk plant a success story? The circuit boards produced at the plant have resulted in discussions about customer satisfaction, fun in the workplace, and reasonably priced products. A decade or more ago, plant managers in what was then the Soviet Union were not interested in such issues. The Russian economy must produce many more examples like Obninsk to turn itself around. The joint American-Russian venture has resulted in the sale in Russia of 24,000 cameras, less than half a month's production, the rest being exported. However, it is estimated that 100 times as many, or 2.4 million cameras, could be sold if quality is maintained and the cameras are priced reasonably. Lines form early every morning at Polaroid's shop. Sales personnel have been trained by Polaroid to be courteous and responsive. These sales characteristics, like the sparkling plant, are new experiences in Russia. Of course, many other new thoughts and events are occurring in Russia. For years, Soviet workers were depicted by the Western press as loafers and thieves. Polaroid executives heard these stereotypes before setting up the Obninsk plant. However, after meeting some Russian workers, they decided that clean workplaces, equitable pay, and teamwork would be as effective in Russia as elsewhere. Polaroid pays workers almost twice the average of Moscow factory workers. Furthermore, they are paid on time. These innovations have led potential employees to want to work for Polaroid, and when they do so, they respond positively to incentive pay plans. Years of central command control in the Soviet Union appear to have devastated the economy, but haven't entirely eliminated Russian workers' enthusiasm for work, quality products, and learning. Managing the Russians has been an illuminating experience for North American expatriates in Obninsk. Still, skeptics question whether Russian managers can take over key positions and operate the plant without any Western managerial guidance. There's also the question of whether the new ways of thinking will last in the social and economic turmoil now being experienced in Russia. Only time will tell. So here's the case questions. What roles must a North American manager practice in the Russian Obninsk plant? Should Polaroid use Russian managers in all managerial positions? Why or why not? How will competition influence the managerial practices of Western managers in the Obninsk plant? So that's the first case study with its questions. And case number 2, a competitive advantage, treating women fairly. The evolution of management has been presented in this chapter. As management knowledge and practice have evolved, so has the composition of the Canadian workforce. Significant shifts have occurred in demographics, the baby boomers, Generation X, the empty nesters, the changing gender mix, the changing racial and language mixes, the changing educational levels. Managers today must relate to an entirely different workforce than their predecessors did a generation ago. It can no longer be assumed that the workforce is a homogeneous, predictable group. Each of the diverse segments consists of people who want to be and deserve to be valued for themselves. To acquire and keep a competitive advantage, managers must understand, address, and respect diversity. Women have increasingly entered the workforce, and some have reached levels in the hierarchy that would have been almost unheard of even as little as 20 years ago. But for every Margaret Whitty, CEO of Royal Oak Mines, and every Madam Justice Beverly McLaughlin, Supreme Court of Canada, there are 1,000 women who are being recognized and marked for promotion in less visible positions. Even so, in many organizations, there is still the glass ceiling, the invisible but real barrier that keeps women from rising in the hierarchy. Managers must consider to what extent this glass ceiling and other forms of subtle discrimination exist in their workplace. Gender bias or preconceptions that result in unequal treatment of women are documented in recruitment, selection, promotion, salary, allocation, performance appraisal, and management development. To be competitive, it is not enough for an organization to eliminate these kinds of discrimination. This change in attitudes and practices also must be seen as having occurred. If an organization is viewed as a fair place for women to work, qualified women will be attracted to it. Conversely, if it is viewed as a place that clings to old discriminatory attitudes and practices, it will be denied the benefit of being able to recruit from half of the population. It is a challenge for managers to work effectively in this direction while countering the resistance that faces this or any other change. And an organization that effectively shuts off the creativity and energy of half of the potential workforce will suffer against the competition and ultimately will pay a large price for having failed to break free from gender stereotypes and old habits. So the case study number 2 questions. Number 1, what have been the effects on management of the increase in workforce diversity since the days of Frederick Taylor? Number 2, do you believe that women can be as good managers as men? Why is your answer limited by circumstances in which women find themselves? Number 3, what is the role of managers in addressing workforce diversity? Not only gender diversity, but all of the facets of diversity in today's workforce. Application exercise number 1. Managerial behavior self-assessment. Managers are likely to apply any of the following 20 statements depending on the situation. Consider how you believe you would act in each of the situations presented and assign a number from 1 to 9, where 1 represents not very often, 4 sometimes but not often, 7 occasionally, and 9 very often. There are no right or wrong answers, but to the extent that you are able to analyze your reactions accurately, this exercise may help you find something about your natural style of management. So if I worked as a manager, I will, statement 1, carefully set clear goals for the group. Represent the group with enthusiasm to outsiders. Carefully review the group's performance. Intervene to handle internal conflicts. Attempt to receive the best work schedules for the group. Motivate the group to perform at optimum level. Examine the group's past and present performance. Transmit relevant information to the group. Positively influence how top managers view the group. Find opportunities for the group to excel. Take on difficult projects with risks so that the group can make an impact. Make sure that the group is represented at important social events. Pass along relevant group information to top managers. Discipline individuals who purposefully disrupt the group. Reward good performers equitably. Bring recognition to outstanding group members. Provide needed time, materials, or resources on the request of members. Provide needed data to help members complete a project. Represent the group when requests for information are made. Help group members with other groups and outsiders' requests. After having assigned a number to each statement, place those numbers in the following table. Total the 2 numbers for each characteristic and divide by 2 to arrive at the averages. So this would be difficult to relay. Reading to you. I'll go on to the next exercise. Application exercise 1.2. Working with people is never efficient. That's kind of an interesting start. With all of the time management tools available on the market today, filling each time slot with constructive and important work seems easier than ever. But there is one reason why even the most effective manager can never plan a perfectly productive day. Working with people is never efficient. While corporate problems can be neatly outlined and resolved strategically, people require unlimited time. Listening to and working towards resolving human issues is possibly the most difficult job a manager faces. Such problems are never resolved with reactions, snap decisions, or delegations. The manager must find a way to move or motivate the employee from the ineffective place towards increased productivity without a guidebook or manual with all sorts of answers. It is a day-to-day aspect of management where planning strategies often fall short. Questions. What type of skills would be helpful when dealing with the people side of management? Number 2. Think of your favorite boss or teacher. What did that person do to motivate you? What do you do in your personal life that builds relationships? And then there's an internet application question or section. Enter Bombardier's website. Check out the information in this site, especially its corporate profile and annual reports section. And then answer the following question. What are the building blocks of Bombardier's competitive advantage? Continue to explore the website and identify other aspects of the company's approach to doing business. Search for the website of an organization in which managers discuss their approach to planning, organizing, leading, or controlling. What is the organization's approach to management? What effect has this approach had on the organization's performance? And that is the end of chapter 1. So if you're interested, click the next video for chapter 2, which is called The Environments of Business, Culture, Social Responsibility, and Ethics. Thank you.